Welcome to a video on literary analysis for session 3. We're going to be doing the same thing we have been doing, which is writing a 5-paragraph essay, but our topic and approach is going to be a little bit different this time. So I want to give you some tips and pointers to make that a little bit easier. So when I'm reading, I look at the text and I ask usually these 3 questions. 1, what is it saying? 2, how does it say it? And finally, what does it mean? Which is the core of what we're going to be doing this session as we look at a literary analysis paper. So what's it saying? That's essentially summarizing, but pause for a moment. We want to be cautious with summarizing. That often means that we start sharing the story as close to word for word as we can get it, which means we basically rewrite it. And so we write a couple of pages of retelling the story. And that's not what we want to do with summarizing. Summarizing is taking a lot of material and compacting it. So one of the examples I like to use is the idea of if I had to tell someone about this movie I just saw, but I had to put it into a fortune cookie of like 10 words or less, what would I do? What would I pick out as the most important elements? So some things we want to start off thinking about that would go into these short 10 words are some of the basics. Who's there? Who is on the page? Those are our characters. Where are they? Because the location and the setting can have an impact. So we want to be aware of that. And most importantly, what are they doing? That's the storyline or plot, and that's going to set us up with the excitement that happens in a story. So the same way that every situation is more than its parts, that's what we're looking at here. We're saying, what do we see as the all-encompassing purpose of this situation? And that's what it is saying, which I think is the one that everyone is the most comfortable with. We feel like we have assessed enough stories, that we've watched enough shows, that we get this as we start off. So the second question is, how does it do that? How is it talking to us? How is it sharing the idea? So as you can imagine, it could be a movie, it could be a TV show, but in writing, it could be a short story or a novel. It could be a play, which is a script. Think about all your favorite actors getting these as they decide who they're going to play. It could be poetry, which is quite different. You always know it when you see it. Or something like what we're writing right now, which is an essay or an article. These aren't necessarily the most important elements. They don't necessarily have a huge impact in terms of the theme that we're reading about, but it helps us gain some insights into what the author may be wanting to accomplish. So we want to be aware of what's going on there. So now we get to the biggest question. What does it mean? That is generally boiled down to a theme. And a theme is the subject. What is it really talking about? As you can imagine, the stories we're reading are not about what they look like on the surface. So Gift of the Magi is not going to be about Christmas presents. It could look like that on the surface, but there's more to it. So we look for something that's a recurring or pervading idea. We want to find these because they give meaning to what we are reading or seeing or hearing. And the other part of that is that it's happening already. You are recognizing this innately. You're not necessarily using this language, but you are recognizing that there is a purpose and a point. And if we know how to put that into a sentence or into a paragraph or into a paper, then we are being informed consumers. So when you go to a movie and your friend says, should I go see that? And you give them a rundown of what it's about and why they should or shouldn't go, you are doing all of the steps that we're doing for our paper. So let's look at some of the pieces. So themes are generally commonly held. So if I went to SparkNotes, if I went to one of those sites, Shmoop is a fun one. If I went to those, I would see that there are certain themes that everyone says is happening. And you may see that. You may pick up the work and go, oh, that's the theme. Snap, I have it. But you may not. So a theme could be something like Beauty and the Beast. It's all about what's inside, and that matters more than what is outside. So you may see that right away, or you may see something else, which means you're seeing a personal theme. And either one is great. I just want to give you the skills and the keys to share that. The key is sharing that theme with others. So 1, we're going to have a theme that we see, and 2, we're going to give evidence. It's not enough to say, I saw this in that particular story. It's not enough to say, I felt like this movie was about hope. We have to say why it was about hope, why we saw that, why we felt that. It's not enough to say that a character is sad. We want to give examples for why we have taken that away from the story. So evidence can come in a couple of different forms. 2 general types are culturally influenced and textual evidence. So I want to touch on this one here because we're not going to give it its own slide. Cultural evidence is sort of what you see and expect. So an example of this could be that in Western culture, you would expect to see a bride wearing white. White in Western culture represents purity, and we would traditionally see that in a wedding. However, if you went to another culture, say India, you would see brides wearing red because that is their traditional color. So when you look at where a story is set, that geographical location, when you look at when a story is set, in the past, in the present, in the future, perhaps a story that is in its present, which is way in our past, those particular elements start to matter because different ideas, different worldviews are going to be encapsulated in that. But what we're mostly going to look at is textual evidence. And the idea here is that we're going to take what we have read in the text and we're going to say, this sentence is why I believe X to be true. So your outline is going to look a lot like what we've already have. We're going to have our introduction. We're going to have our thesis, which states what theme we're going to describe, and give a process, which are a couple of points that we're going to share. And in each of those points, we are going to provide a quote that says, this is what I saw and this is why. And then, of course, we're going to summarize in the end why we're right. Why have the 3 quotes or examples of cultural evidence that you shared, why do they prove this to be true? So an example of what this looks like in the text is that we include a quote. So in this slide, I've shown 3 examples, one from O. Henry, one from Maupassant, and one from Jacobs, so that you can see what that would look like. Because we're taking them from websites, we're not going to have locations. We're just going to have the author's last name and the year of publication. And both in the announcement and in the next slide, you're going to see what the references should look like. But in each of these, I give you an example of an idea that I have, such as this one. By the end of the story, Mathilde has still not learned her lesson. And then, rather than leaving you to say, well, why do you think that? Why do you believe that to be true? I give you a quote from the story. Quote, and she smiled with a joy that was at once proud and ingenuous. And both of those to me show that she hasn't learned. So look for those quotes in the story. If you feel stuck, if you feel like you have a great idea, that you're seeing something in the story, but you feel stuck with one or more of the examples, don't hesitate to send me an email and to ask me to help you out with that. And of course, here are our references. So remember that you're ready for this. You've been doing this with tons of stories to date, but we're using a specific form. We're looking at specific literary language to describe it. So enjoy those stories and share what you see in them with me.